Transmissions will resume. Now try to push drugs to keep us all dumbed down and hope that we will never see the truth around. Another promise, another seed, another package like to keep us trapped in greed. A green belts wrapped around our minds, an endless red tape to keep the truth confined. Up and take my power back. It's time the fat cats had a heart attack. You know that their time's coming to an end. We have to unify and watch our flag ascend. They will not force us. They will stop degrading us. They will not control us. And we will be victorious.
And welcome to Patriots Lament. My name is Joshua Bennett.
Cardio burns fat.
Here we've got sorry about that. Studio here. Got Mr. Mike Anderson. Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
Thought it was about time we played that whole song.
Mm-hmm.
Been too long. Yeah. So first off, I want to say welcome, and let's get to our sponsor, one of our sponsors, Alaska Chaga. Be sure to visit alaskachaga.us for chaga teas, powders, and chaga chunks. I don't know what a chunk is. I've seen them, but I usually burn them. Chaga mushrooms are native to Fairbanks and provide a wide range of health and wellness benefits. Alaska Chaga is harvested and processed locally right here in Fairbanks, which is a good thing, actually having something made here in Fairbanks, besides some of the other things that aren't. Visit alaskachaga.us and use the discount code Patriot, P-A-T. Well, if you don't know how to spell Patriot, you can't find Alaska Chaga. During your checkout, save 10% on all your orders. And the other thing is that it helps sponsor the show. So we thank them very much for getting a hold of us and being willing to do that. And also, don't forget to join us on our website, which we're kind of lazy at. But there are some really good articles going all the way back to 2011. I actually go back and read some of those sometimes. But we also have, I think we have the button there you can press to find Alaska Chaga. And we also have a donate page, and I haven't asked permission to say their names, so I won't. But to the people who have, we know who you are, and we thank you very much. And all the moolah just goes here to help pay for the show because, well, we pay for it. Yeah, that's it. All right. We haven't been getting to the phones very much, so we will open the phone lines right now. 907-458-8255 if you want to call in and have a little chit-chat. I know we had a couple people last week that we weren't able to get to, so we apologize. We're constrained with time, and there's so much stuff that we want to say. You know how it is, and you just can't stop Mike once he gets rolling. The other thing, let's see, yeah, I think that's it. Make sure you check us out. We are finally, after 9.5, almost 10 years, we finally do have a podcast, so we're podcasting everything. So get on your favorite podcast, just look up Patriot Lament because we're on all of them, I guess. It's pretty sweet. And also you can join us live. Get on YouTube and just search for Patriot Lament. Jump on there. You can look at our ugly mugs, but the fun part is you can chat in the live chat there if you want to make some comments without calling in. And you can be anonymous that way if you want to put some fake name, like some people I know. Anyways, we have a special guest at the top of the hour, Adam Dick from the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And I wanted to let everyone know that Dr. Ron Paul had a mini stroke yesterday.
But he's doing fine now.
But he's doing just
Apparently.
fine. Yeah. We need him more than ever right at the moment because of the word that he's always been spreading, but he's been rocking it lately, especially. But he is doing fine. I spoke with Daniel McAdams too, and he said that, yeah, he's good to go. And I'm sure Adam will be able to give us an update when he joins us at the top of the hour. So we are going to mostly be focusing on COVID with him. And I thought, Mike, there's a couple things that we should talk about because fortunately, in some aspects, and unfortunately in other aspects, the world is still going. I say unfortunately because the state's still going. Two topics we might hit on before the top here. One is China-American relations as far as Taiwan. This isn't military doctrine, the military hasn't decided this, but there was a article in Military Times where a Marine, I don't remember what his rank was, but he commented, and he might even be retired now, that he thought that in order to protect Taiwan from China, because there's been a lot of, tensions are high, let's say. So he suggested sending Marines into Taiwan right now, American Marines into Taiwan. And the Chinese, I don't know what the war ministry, the PLA, anyways, the Chinese army, the official word from their English news people or whatever over there, just to let the English speaking people know what's up. They said, you send troops to Taiwan American troops on Taiwan is unacceptable, and we will go to war. No, that'll make us mad. You put your troops in Taiwan, we will go to war. Hot war, not playing around. And the United States has been selling quite a few extra weapons, sending them, Taiwan some special stuff that really is ticking off China. Just ramping it up. Both sides are to blame for ramping it up. But I don't know that China is, if tensions went down, if the American side dropped tensions, I don't think China would ramp up and all of a sudden just invade Taiwan, because it wouldn't really be in their best interest.
No, it wouldn't. And there's also the thing about we as a planet, governments have moved on from the invasion to take over scenario, and now it's a model of economic warfare. And so, if there's going to be warfare going on, China would rather do it in a form of economic warfare, and perhaps that's what happened with the whole COVID thing. If you remember back before it got all ramped up, or in the early stages, there were all those videos coming out of China about people collapsing on the street. And you look at them, and the first thing you think is, "Oh, that's going to be really, really bad." And then we start questioning, how do we know that this is actually COVID stuff? Maybe that's just a drunk guy falling over. And you remember us having those conversations?
Yeah.
And perhaps those were part of the economic warfare. Klaus Schwab, in his book, I just started reading it. Klaus Schwab is the head of the World Economic Forum, and he points out in his book that it was private companies that initially started requesting that they stop functioning because they were afraid of the consequences of this disease. And then, of course, the government obliged and amplified it tremendously immediately after. And so, was that the intent? Was that China waging a form of economic warfare by instilling fear in the markets to disrupt them for its benefit? And so that's an example of how it's no longer about let's just go invade someone. Now it's about behind the scenes economic warfare. And so you're right. I don't think it'd be in China's best interest to just get involved in a major physical confrontation right now.
A hot war.
Right.
Yeah.
There's kind of an agreement between the U.S. and Taiwan that if Taiwan is invaded, that by China, that the U.S. would defend. And
is there a country out there that we don't invade, or that the U.S. doesn't invade, that they don't say if someone else does, they'll go to war for them?
Right. That's the U.S. in that regard. The U.S. is kind of the last holdout. It's the one that still invades other countries.
Right. Kind of funny the way that things go there.
Mm-hmm.
Not funny at all, but funny as in ironic and stupid. So we'll keep an eye on that. I know Target Liberty, obviously, that I read probably too much. No, I read constantly. He's, Robert Wenzel's talking about it, and Zero Hedge talking about it. There's plenty of stuff out there off the mainstream media that you can read. If you just look at the mainstream media stuff, you'll just get warmongering crap.
Mm-hmm.
So there's good analysis out there for what's going on there. So hopefully that will stay. Oh, let's just not. What did I read? I read an article where some jackass was just saying we should just go to war now because it's inevitable. So first strike kind of thing, and all this, and it's just like what a moron. What a moron.
History tends to show that the one who strikes first ends up losing.
And they should, if it's for
yeah. Well, remember that the Civil War, it was officially it was the South that struck first, but it was the North that set them up for it at Fort Sumter by setting ships off the coast, and it just produced a situation where the South decided just to strike first because they were tired of dealing with it.
Yeah, and
so they lost the moral authority.
I watched, just talking about war, I watched the new Tom Hanks movie, Greyhound.
I have not seen it.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't think I've heard of it.
My heart was just like thumpity, thump, thump, thump. There was no, there was like 3 minutes of off the ship scene, just to set up for just, talking to his girl or whatever.
Mhm.
And then he's on the ship, and what is about is it was in February 42 was the timeline. So it's right after America, gets into the war, and all so Tom Hanks is on the battleship Greyhound, and he's escorting the transports and supplies across the Atlantic. And the story is basically about the wolf pack, the German wolf pack, once they get into the dead zone there, where at that time there was no air support.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, holy Moses, that thing was action the whole time, just the whole thing. And at the same time, did a great job. Tom Hanks did a great. I mean, he did such a good job watching that or playing that part as captain of the ship. It was a tearjerker at times, even with your heart beating like 110 miles an hour. And then at the end there, it, told a little graphic. 3,500 ships were sunk in the Atlantic during the World War II, with the loss of 72,800 lives or 500 lives.
Okay.
And I immediately thought, I assumed they were only speaking of the Allies.
Mm-hmm.
And because the first, I don't want to spoil anything, but, some Germans get killed. I'll just put it like that. And everyone's cheering, yeah, we got those German blah, blah, blahs. And he said, no, we just lost some souls. And yeah, but the first thing I thought was 72,000 teenage boys were killed before they even got to England. Because as we know, the satanic warmongers like to send the young boys off to do their bidding.
Yeah, it's a blood ritual.
But Greyhound with Tom Hanks, the only way I know that you can see it, there's got to be more. I watched it on Apple TV.
Okay.
Or Apple Plus or something. Apple TV Plus. Highly recommend if you're into those kind of. I love World War II movies, even though I'm quite anti-war. A lot of them, if you watch the real good ones, you don't feel like you wish you were going to war right away. The glorified ones where it makes you hoorah, hoorah, like I think pretty much all of the Iraq or the war on terrorism ones just makes you think that, we need to be over there killing everyone. There's a lot of good World War II movies that Tom Hanks has been involved in, actually, that I think give a pretty good, it just makes you feel what a waste. In fact, my father-in-law and mother-in-law are visiting us, and that was the first thing he said was, what a waste. The economical waste is one thing, but the human lives, it's just what a horrid and horrible thing. So I've only got about 10 minutes here left. So the other thing I want to bring up, maybe we'll get into this in the last half hour after Adam visits us, because he's only going to be with us for an hour. We had Ruth Bader Ginsburg pass away. I shall not shed a tear. Nay. A murderous, satanic woman herself. What is that in the song where the people rejoice when the evil rulers die? Well,
Perish.
Yeah.
Oh
well, my tears shall not swell. But what that does is it leaves a Supreme Court seat open. There's obviously a battle of whether Trump should be able to fill the seat because it's an election year.
Yeah, and I don't even understand that argument. That's
his constitutional duty.
I mean, that's what he's still the president, so officially he's still supposed to fulfill all his duties. I mean, it's kind of like the long haul airlines. They have 2 shifts of pilots.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the first shift decides in his last hour of a shift, my shift's almost over. I'm not gonna do anything now. I'm not gonna pay
I'll
attention.
just go sit in the back.
I'll just
here.
go sitting back until the next guy comes up.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, and we knew it was going to come back to bite him anyways, is that when Obama, the same thing happened at the end of one of his terms. And the Republicans at the time were like, well, it's too late. And you can't. And now turnaround's fair play. So the Democrats are complaining, but I don't think they'll be able to stop. Now he's going to nominate someone, and they already know they have the votes to put whoever he does. He had a couple people, one who, as far as, how do you say good or bad when we're talking about these people? Well, I kind of like Clarence Thomas. I think he's okay. But there's one, I think she was Puerto Rican or Cuban descent. Her family.
That's there were 2 women. He's
picking the lesser of the 2 goods. The one he picked is there's quite a few things that are okay with her, but not, in my opinion, there's like 1 or 2 decisions she's made from a libertarian perspective where I'd say, okay, well, that fits a liberty thing. And some of the other stuff are just like, any old conservative would go along with that. I wouldn't necessarily care. The bad part is she's already ruled in favor of lockdowns. And she's in favor of forced vaccinations. Okay. And which we pretty much can guarantee some of this is eventually going to go to the Supreme Court, I hope. Yeah. And the other gal is against.
Okay. And the lady that he's picked, she's the Cuban American. Right?
No.
Or it's not. The other one.
Yeah. It's the other.
Yeah. Okay.
No, the Cuban American lady was she was basically a Clarence Thomas female. Yeah. As far as strict constructionist, constitutionalist, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Yeah. So we'll see. One of, obviously the reason why he wants to get someone on there that's his is there is a very good possibility that we will see the presidential election go to the Supreme Court. Right. So, with all these mail-in ballots, there's so many stories already about people getting dozens of ballots. And yeah, there were a couple of stories. You get like a dozen ballots, I guess you get to vote for a dozen times. Yeah, there's already been stories about people finding loads of ballots in dumpsters. And so yeah, and I guess several, I forget what the number was, but it had like Trump and a different vice president, and some have had Pence as president with a different person, and vice versa, even on the Democratic side. Oh, okay. So let's see, you have, well, I guess if they said Kamala Harris and Biden, that would be correct, because Biden's not going to be the first person on that ticket. Right. So obviously the push for the mail-in ballots is just, it's just for shenanigans and hooliganism for sure, which is unfortunate. But you know what? Whatever. Right. My only interest in the presidential election really is the aftermath, because whoever loses is going to be really mad, and whoever loses is going to say the other side cheated, no matter what. Yeah, and well, no matter what happens, it's going to be it's probably going to be a bunch of riots. If Trump wins, it's going to be riots because the communists are mad. If Biden wins, it's going to be riots because the communists now have permission to do whatever they want.
So you can't win either way.
Ugh. Yeah, it's terrible. We'll see. I think there are more bads to look at if Biden wins, just because, he said that might be a good idea just to lock down the country for 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
And mandate a nationwide mask thing and mandate a nationwide, which, the federal government has zero powers supposedly to do such a thing. But we've seen that people tend to just obey.
How would they even they couldn't enforce anything like that, because just because it's federal doesn't mean that the local law enforcement is able to enforce it.
I guess they could send federal troops in, and
well, that's the thing. They're gonna station feds on every street corner to make sure you're wearing a mask.
Oh man. Well, there's plenty of stories this week of people being arrested for not for burning buildings down and destroying public property and stuff like that, but there was a church group, I think they announced it on Facebook, in Moscow, Idaho, not Russia, Idaho. And they met in a parking lot, and we're just singing hymns or songs or whatever. And it's up on Target Liberty, you can watch. And they were arrested for not social distancing.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, how far is that going to? Oh, well, there was another video too. There was another story. It was a lady at a high school football team game, and she was attacked by the cop. She didn't have her mask on, and I guess the story is that she wouldn't put one on, so she got arrested for criminal trespassing.
Right.
So that's how they spin it now.
Yeah, criminal trespassing on a school that she pays taxes to send her kids to.
Right. It's not private property. So that's and that's the same stuff that they've been doing in Australia, in Victoria, and it's they've admitted different. I think CNN has stated it. There's some other news agencies that have stated it that Australia is the model for how they want to do the lockdowns here, and so you see that popping up in a few places. Around the country.
All right. Well, we got to hit the news. We'll be right back.
Choice to replace the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Multiple sources tell Fox News he has chosen Seventh Circuit Appeals Court Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Fox's David Sponge with some background.
Many conservatives would be excited. Those conservatives have craved a conservative voice here on the court, kind of in the mold of Justice Antonin Scalia, and Judge Barrett proves that. One of the reasons she actually clerked for him back in 1998, specifically working here inside the Supreme Court building behind him. Now, she knew him. She saw him operate. She's a textualist. She understands the text of the Constitution. That's what many conservatives are looking for, specifically the Federalist Society.
President Trump's announcement scheduled for 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Thousands of people attending a prayer march in Washington ahead of the announcement. It will make its way from the Lincoln Memorial to Capitol Hill. Vice President Mike Pence making a surprise appearance at the event.
Pray for all of the members of the Congress of the United States. Pray for all of our justices on the Supreme Court, including the remarkable woman that the president will nominate to fill the seat on the Supreme Court later today.
The march organized by evangelist Franklin Graham. The mayor of Rochester, New York, names an interim police chief after the previous chief resigned over outrage in the death of Daniel Prude.
On October 14th, Cynthia Harriet Sullivan will become the first female interim police chief in Rochester, New York. Sullivan served the department for 24 years. She previously held a role examining deaths in police custody. The move follows weeks of protests over the death of Daniel Prue.
Fox's Alex Hogan. America is listening to Fox News.
Tuesday, President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden face off in an epic showdown to decide the future of our nation.
This is the most important election in the history of our country. This is our moment. This is our mission.
Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace moderates the first presidential debate from Cleveland, Ohio. Listen to Fox News radio coverage starting at 8 p.m. East with an hour-long pre-show hosted by national correspondent Jared Halpern and political analyst Josh Krausar. Download the Fox News app and click listen at the bottom of the screen to hear it live. It's the most anticipated, consequential American election in history. And now, you'll have access like never before with Fox News Democracy 2020 Live, the new dual-screen experience that lets you react in real time to the debate answers, weigh in on the issues, and see what your favorite Fox News personalities are saying.
Make your voice heard this election season.
It's in your hands with Democracy 2020 Live.
Visit foxnews.com/2020 Live to join the conversation. And don't forget to watch the debate Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern on Fox News Channel.
Authorities in London say several police officers were hurt when they ordered thousands of protesters in an anti-lockdown protest in Trafalgar Square to disperse. Metropolitan Police say the protesters broke national rules by failing to social distance or wear masks. Gatherings of people without masks or social distancing are limited to 6 people in the UK. Many schools are still closed, but in California, some counties are starting to move out of the more highly restrictive tiers and allow for school reopenings.
In Orange County, 5 school districts reopened this week, including Irvine Unified.
I'm very pleased with how our district handled it.
Oria Hirschhorn's 7-year-old first grader was thrilled to get off Zoom, even with all of the restrictions in place at school. Hirschhorn says on a scale of 1 to 10, she feels safety back at school is about an 8 or even a 9.
Every child has their own desk with the plexiglass. We had to buy them supplies, so all the crayons and the dry erase boards, the markers, everything is in a bag that is theirs that we brought from our home and is kept in their cubbies, so nothing is shared.
5 more districts in Orange County, which is south of Los Angeles, are scheduled to reopen next week. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
The latest guilty plea in the college admissions bribery scheme involves a former entrance exam administrator. Fox's Kathleen Maloney reports.
Nikki Williams is a former employee of the Houston Independent School District, and she administered the college entrance exams at the public high school where she worked. Prosecutors say as part of a scam to help wealthy parents rig their kids' test scores, she accepted money from admissions consultant Rick Singer in exchange for letting someone else take exams in place of his client's children. Singer also pleading guilty in connection with the bribery scheme, as well as Mark Riddell, who secretly took exams for the students. Kathleen Maloney, Fox News.
And I'm Joe Shiro, Fox News.
Hi, Fairbanks. This is Jimmy Cash. When I was elected to the Assembly last year, my goal was to rein in borough spending and stand up for residents who feel like they're being ignored. Nobody could have predicted where we'd be today, a time when hundreds of businesses have had to close their doors to the public, and thousands of residents are still uncertain about their financial future. Now more than ever, we need somebody willing to stand and rein in borough spending and stop new and increasing taxes. That's what I've done, and that's what I'll continue to do. And I'd appreciate your vote on October 6th.
This message paid for by Cash for Assembly.
Explore the Highlands of Scotland, Bluegrass Hills of Kentucky, or discover new flavors from Japan. Brown Jug's inaugural week of whiskey is in full swing with plenty to offer. Nestled among the limited, rare, and hard-to-find whiskeys at jaw-dropping low prices, you'll also find great pricing on regularly available selections. Only at your local Brown Jug warehouse store for a limited time. Nobody beats Brown Jug.
Brown Jug. Brown Jug.
Taxes, gun control, tariffs, immigration, socialism, fascism, the right, the left, war, peace. Where are we going in America? Well, join KFAR Radio every Saturday for the return of local perspective on today's issues, with special guests and your calls and your opinions. Only on Patriot's Lament on KFAR 97.5 FM, 660 AM, and streaming live at KFARradio.com. Saturdays, 9:30 to 11:30 on KFAR.
Fall and winter in Alaska bring new sporting opportunities. Grouse, ptarmigan, and other small game hunting, snowshoeing and winter camping, predator calling and camping. Gear up with Frontier Outfitters and prepare to succeed. Traps, snares, and calls. Guns and ammunition. Stay warm and dry with the right clothing. Rest easy with tents, sleeping bags, and camp necessities. ATV and snow machine accessories are just downstairs at Century Hardware. Alaska is new every season, and for every season, there's Frontier Outfitters for your Alaskan lifestyle.
Ballot Measure 1 is risky and reckless. The Alaska Department of Law says the ballot measure is unclear and poorly written. That's what happens when complex policy is written by a small private group of political activists behind closed doors. With no public hearings, no public comment, no economic studies, and no independent analysis of the measure's impact on Alaskans. Complex legislation normally receives dozens of hearings where experts and Alaskans can express their views. But on Ballot Measure 1, Alaskans were shut out. Join the fight against this harmful ballot measure. On November 3rd, vote no on 1.
This communication was paid for by One Alaska. Vote no on 1, Anchorage, Alaska. Top 3 contributors are BP Alaska, ConocoPhillips Alaska, and ExxonMobil.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that ever I took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams.
I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson.
Government is instituted to protect property, this being the end of government. That alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exceptions, and monopolies deny to part of its citizens that free use of their own faculties. James Madison.
It would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. John Adams.
Whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. The gentleman may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
My people perish for the lack of knowledge. God.
All righty. Welcome back to Patriot Lament. My name is Joshua Bennett. And in studio here, of course, we got Mr. Mike Anderson. Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
And we have a very special guest who we have neglected to have on for a long, well, I guess we were out there for a while too. Mr. Adam Dick from the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. He's a senior fellow there. Good morning, Adam. Welcome back. It's good to
Hey,
see.
good morning.
We actually get to see you. That's great.
That's right.
How has your 2020 been?
Well, it's been tough.
Yeah.
I told a few people I'm learning a lot more about what it's like to live in a communist country.
Yeah, no joke.
I think the coronavirus crackdown is pushing people around in similar ways that as has been experienced in places like the Soviet Union and China, and it's a depressing situation. And one thing I watched this morning that just showed how depressing it is a local news report. I live here in the Metroplex in Texas. The news report was from Fort Worth, and it was from Cook's Children's Hospital, where they have, on average, one a day children coming in after failed attempts at suicide.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's which is a doubling from before. It's a decent sized city and a big hospital, but that's a doubling, and it's probably gone up a lot in other places around the country. So you think about that, and that's one of the consequences of these policies.
Yeah.
And the children are isolated, many of them from other kids, from even grandparents, when their parents believe the fear mongering.
Yeah.
Their parents may have lost their jobs. So there's a lot of depressing things happening, and that's just on the psychological level, on the health level. People miss their medical screenings. People because hospitals were largely shut down because of a medical emergency. People weren't able to have their scheduled surgeries and other treatments.
Yeah.
So the physical health consequences are dire from the coronavirus crackdown also.
Yeah, and it's kind of the old seen and unseen. We can point out a lot of things, as you just did, that are bad right now, but I think years down the road we're going to start feeling the effects too. One of the things, and I was listening to Tom Woods' show the other day, and his guest was saying, we don't even know how many people who have missed cancer screenings and other screenings like that years down the road, that's going to affect them and it's going to affect the medical institutions. It's going to affect the whole society. So there's things that we don't even know about yet that this is going to pop up. So my son got a moose this year, and when we were packaging it, we write on the package what it was and what year. And I suggested, let's not even put the year on it because I don't want to remember 2020. There were a couple articles that you've written lots of articles at the Ron Paul Institute, folks. It's another website that we suggest and ask that you go to daily, because Dr. Paul has on the Liberty on his Liberty Report.
Mm-hmm.
My brain fart. You guys have just been tearing it up, both in articles and on YouTube. And one of the leading voices against the plandemic is, it's becoming to be known among a lot of people. And one of the things that I saw recently that you wrote was what was going on in Texas. And we have been in touch with a few representatives here in Alaska, because back in March, the Alaska legislature gave the governor basically emergency powers. They gave up all of their duties, basically, as the wimps that some of them were. And for a little bit, I can give them a little bit of a break, because at the very beginning there was a lot of fear and people didn't know what is this. But they gave him emergency powers till the middle of November back in March. And Alaska has had a full 50 people die, not from coronavirus, because everyone had underlying problems. That the average is 2.6, but every single one of them has had some other health problems, and and but we know how that works. And I think I don't remember how many people we've hit, as far as positive cases, which is for some reason the bad news now. But our hospitalizations, the emergency care beds that we have, our model that the University of Anchorage, Alaska told us that we would have 15,000 people at this time in the hospital from COVID-19. And the most that we've had take up the emergency beds has been 30 at one time. So we've been asking, hey, Governor, there's no pandemic here. Give up your powers. Try a little bit of what George Washington did at the end of the war, and he gave his sword up and he said, I'm relieving myself of power instead of being a power hungry person. In Idaho, the Idaho legislature, the state legislature voted to relinquish the governor's powers, and the Senate stopped it. And one of the reasons that they stopped it, which I think we all need to remember behind all this, every time we hear anything about coronavirus and all this stuff, one of the state senators in Idaho said was, well, we will lose $117 million in funding from the federal government unless we keep following these things. And so how much of it is money? And then, of course, your guys' governor, Dr. Paul's been letting us know how Texas has been going. It's been kind of disappointing to see how that's been. And you wrote a great article. It looks like a majority of the Republicans there have demanded or whatever that he relinquish those emergency mandates. I'll just say that for lack of a better term. So could you explain that to us?
Yeah, first off, I'll start with explaining a little bit of how Texas works. The legislature has not been in session during this entire time that Governor Abbott has been imposing his unilateral mandates since March. In Texas, the legislature doesn't meet too much. It meets for a few months every 2 years. So they won't be back in session until next year. So Governor Abbott has taken upon himself to use all these powers without any authorization. You mentioned in Alaska there was an authorization for some extreme powers for the governor to take action on his own. In Texas, that never happened.
Oh, that's interesting. I did
that's
not.
Right. What the governor legitimately should have done, if he wanted to exercise power beyond 30 days to do something in an emergency, he should have called a special session for the legislature to act. But the reason he probably hasn't done so is because he knew the legislature would stop him from doing the kind of things he's doing. So that's what's going on there. I know in Idaho, when they had a special session that they adopted that legislation you talked about. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems was that the special session was called for other purposes. So there you had a governor also who, even though the governor called a special session, the call for the special session intentionally didn't include the legislature being able to act on the coronavirus policies.
So they didn't just do can't they just do one of those things back like when they were supposed to work on the Articles of Confederation and they wrote a constitution? Couldn't they just kind of go there and do what they want?
Well, that could be something to try. I mean, you definitely could. And it was interesting you talked about the money too, because I know South Dakota, which has done hardly anything,
yes,
to as far as having a coronavirus crackdown, they've done a little bit, but hardly anything compared to other states. They are receiving some of the money. So even if you do hardly anything, you still receive some money. So that's a bad excuse, even if it's true. But it may not even be true that they're missing out on a whole bunch of money by stopping the crackdown. But I'll tell you what happened in Texas. I wrote about this week. The state executive committee, which is a 58-member organization running it's the executive committee for the Republican Party. They passed a no compromise resolution saying that Governor Abbott, criticizing Governor Abbott, his policies against all his policies related to the coronavirus, everything, blanket condemnation of the policies being done by the local governments, and in a bunch of piercing whereas clauses. And then the therefore clause is just a straightforward sentence saying all of it needs to be repealed, all of it. So that's the business closures, the occupancy limits, the mask mandates, quarantine demands for people coming in from out of state, everything, just end it all. None of it should exist, and it should be done immediately. And that's an incredible rebuke because Governor Abbott is a Republican. So this is 54 to 4 majority of the state party's executive committee adopting a resolution that is unbelievably broad and encompassing in its attack on everything that Governor Abbott and local governments have done in reaction to the coronavirus, or supposedly in reaction to the coronavirus.
Right. Has he responded yet? Has there been any response from the administration?
He definitely hasn't followed it. I mean, around the time it came out, I think it was before, he eased up a little. Like some numbers went from 50% occupancy to 75% occupancy.
Oh, what a nice thing.
He did some changes to more honestly count cases because they were throwing in cases from 2 months ago into the present time.
Right.
Instead of telling you what day they actually came from, so he did that. But there's still extreme limits on large gatherings, or bars are totally shut. It's illegal to run a bar and to go to a bar in Texas.
That's been the whole mind-boggling. I mean, not the whole thing, but the arbitrariness of who gets to be open and who doesn't get to be open. Like here in Alaska, a few years ago, cannabis was made legal, so you have all these pot shops around town, and restaurants and all these places and bars and all that were closed. But the Alaska government decided that the pot shops were essential, so they got to stay open. It's like, wait, I mean, good, but how come them and not? I mean, it's so arbitrary that it just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well, one of the things down here in Texas and in a lot of other states is this crackdown has been used as a mechanism to clear out small businesses. Because down here, the big stores, the grocery stores, Costco, Walmart, Target, totally open.
Yep.
And people are supposed to be keeping apart from each other, whatever, but they're packed full of people buying all kinds of stuff. But anybody who had a store that just sold any non-food, just part of that, a lot of their businesses were shut down. Totally. So you couldn't go to them.
Yep.
And how are you supposed to stay in business as a small business when you can't do business?
Right.
A lot of small businesses are funded by a mortgage on the owner's home, for example.
Yeah.
So they have debts. They need the income to come in to pay those debts. Otherwise, not only do they lose a business, they potentially lose their home as well. So that's what we had here. It's a clearing out of a lot of the small businesses. While the big businesses, their sales went up.
Right. They did quite well, actually, during even during the early parts of the April, May, when things were really locked down. That same thing happened here in Fairbanks, to a little, would you say to a lesser extent?
Yeah, to a lesser extent.
From what we've read from other states, but
yeah.
And
it depends on where you're at in Alaska. I mean, Anchorage is a lot worse than
right
here. If you come to Alaska, don't go to Anchorage.
Anchorage is like going into Stalin's Moscow.
Right. It's here too. It does. Even though the Republican governor's been terrible, a lot of it does correspond with the dominance of Democrat or Republican Party, and that I'd say that generally the more heavily Democratic an area is, it'll tend in Texas to have more of the restrictions locally.
I noticed that reading just from different stories on that I've read some of your cities, and I was surprised because I guess I just figured that everyone in Texas was a Republican, but in some of the more larger liberal cities, they were having horrible, and even like judges were deciding what could be done, like making mask mandates and just their medical or whatever, the head of the medical person at the city was making law kind of. So
yeah, on the judges thing out here in Texas, it can be a little confusing. Each county has a county board. It's kind of like a city council, and the counties have taken a lot of control in these crackdowns. And the top person on the county board is called the county judge. So it's really more like the mayor of the county.
Okay.
But in my county, Dallas County, I think it has 5 members of the board, and they kept doing 3-2 votes to implement all these mandates locally. And the two nays were one was the only Republican on the board, and the other was my county board guy, who is a Democrat and has been very strong against it. So he's an exception on the general direction being taken from a partisan angle.
Interesting.
He's been very good on it.
Well, that clears up a lot of stuff, because I literally thought, just reading it, I thought, regular black robe judge. And I said, wow, we're really getting after it now. Judges aren't even pretending to pass laws. They are passing laws. Well, I appreciate that. That clears up a lot of, that's interesting.
You were asking about representatives, particularly state representatives. We have 150 here in the Texas House, and it's a Republican majority, and some of the Republicans have been attacking the governor pretty heavily. Some of them a few weeks back were joined as plaintiffs in a lawsuit against the governor, challenging the way that he was allocating all the money for testing. They set up all these testing sites all over the state, and there are permanent ones. There's one a mile from my house at most, and it's got bays for 10 cars to go through. And it was there, and you'd see workers' vehicles lined up there. There must have been 50 people working there. And for like 2 months or so, it'd be like that, and there'd be hardly anybody being tested, but all these people working there. And then for a while, a couple months ago, there was a big surge in people being tested, and there were tons of cars lined up for a while. And I think people got fed up with it in part. I mean, I know one person who was tested 3 times because his employer, every time he was around somebody who ended up testing positive, he had to go get tested. And that kept happening. But ultimately, employers, realize that this is goofiness. They're paying this guy to go get tested 3 times. And then if he does test positive, then they're going to pay him to stay home for 2 weeks, right? For something that's in his age, maybe it's as dangerous as the flu,
Right.
So now for the last month or two, there's like 1-2 cars there, but there's still all the cars that there must be 50 people working there. So
you're against
the boondoggle that's going up here. They have pop-up ones other places, often in front of churches, actually. They'll have these pop-up coronavirus testing things too. So they're doing everything they've been doing everything they can to have people tested,
Sounds like a good jobs program where you can put that on.
Well, yeah. But while at the same time, so many other people have been thrown into unemployment, but businesses being closed, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've noticed that not enough. I was kind of hoping maybe more government would shut down to protect themselves from the coronavirus. Like the public schools, that's been kind of, we've talked about that. I read that homeschooling has gone up 300%. And I haven't shed a tear that the public schools have closed. But then at the same time, when you take in factors that you talked about with children, who actually, unfortunately in the society that we have, and Dr. Paul's talked about this with welfare and stuff, even, when he was running for president, I wouldn't end welfare in one day, because there's too many people that actually rely on that to live. And, there are kids that go to public school that rely on the public school for their lunch. They rely on the public school for it's their babysitter or whatever. So their parents can work and on and on. So even an evil public school that I'm happy to see is closed, and we encourage people to use the Ron Paul curriculum and keep your kids at home. There are bad side effects or bad things from that. And you've written about even or in the how the CDC, who knows when this will end, and that children are hearing that well, we're not going to be able to get back to normal till 2021, and some have said 2023. And if you're a child, for one, and if you're a child that's already in an environment that's not stable, or a young adult, I kind of like football. Well, I don't know if you can tell. And I've actually thought about some of these high school kids that their last year of school, and they are thinking, I'm going to get my I'm going to play football, and I'm going to get a scholarship and go to a college. And, their whole life they dreamed about something like that. It's gone. And that affects a lot of people. I mean, it might sound silly because it's a football thing, but think of how many different scholarships. And, well, maybe it's a good thing they're not going to the universities now. But then you got to think about kids that are in university in all different kinds of sports that, they got to play their last senior year, and then they're going to go and get drafted. They don't get to do that anymore. And kids that were going to graduate, there's just the effects that it's having on the younger kids. I think I read 24 and between 17 and 24 was the highest. What am I saying? The number, the age-wise, between 17 and 24 is the highest for suicides. So I don't mean we, but the response that the government is taking is killing kids. I saw that in some states where they had a whole year, what a normal year's worth of suicides, they've had it in 1 month. Mm-hmm. And, I know you spoke about that with the children, one a day.
That hospital in Fort Worth. Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
And, one thing I've written about is that this crackdown is supposedly to help the older and more vulnerable, sicker people. But a lot of them don't want to be locked in their house.
Right.
Even if they have a risk that the coronavirus is going to kill them. They'd rather take the risk and spend time with family, go shopping, see a movie in a movie theater, whatever, live their lives, go to a restaurant, see the symphony, watch their kids play in sporting events that are now canceled, right?
Right.
One thing, you have people who retire and they know there's not that many years left. They have a bucket list. They want to travel to see Paris. They want to travel to see some big natural wonder, a secluded park or something. Yeah. They have these goals. They have these things they want to do. They don't just want to be sitting in their house.
Right.
And if they're very risk averse and they want to sit in their house, why not let them? Yeah. And if you follow the normal policy that happened every 2 or 3 years when there's some additional disease like coronavirus that comes along, the policy would have been, the government would have said, hey, there's this kind of dangerous disease. These kind of people are most at risk, so be careful if you're one of them. And they might tell you to wash your hands and a few other things, right? Yeah. But they didn't close businesses. They didn't mandate masks. They didn't do any of that. And, if they'd done that, the disease would also spread more quickly. I mean, right. They were trying to inhibit the spread. Well, why inhibit the spread? If people under 50 or even under 70 are hardly at risk of death or major injury, and especially people in their 20s and teens and younger, all the people whose schools were closed are at virtually no risk.
Right.
What you want to do is you want to get all those people just have them mingle. They should be spreading the disease among themselves, and they can act as a barrier to prevent it from spreading to the older and more vulnerable people. Yeah. You could get through this quickly. And then those people could come out of their homes if they were too worried and be safe, because that immunity is spread throughout the country. That's what happened in Sweden.
Right.
And then you wouldn't have the economic hit, you wouldn't have the psychological hit and the suicides, you wouldn't have the missed medical treatments, you wouldn't have had people unable to see family, unable to take trips. People would have just gone on with their lives, and even the suffering directly from coronavirus, to the extent there is, would have been less.
Yeah. Yeah, and you think about older people that are in the last days of their lives, or people that are having surgical, people that were allowed to have surgeries or whatever, and they weren't able to have any family to be with them in the last days or weeks of whatever, before they passed away. I can't think of anything more horrible, really. Your wife's in the hospital, your husband, your child, or whatever, and you're not able to even go visit them.
Right.
It's unbelievable. It's evil.
I think for somebody who's in a nursing home or in a hospital, they're sick. Seeing family is part of the therapy. It's part of the
right.
It's like medicine, to be able to smile and talk with people you know and love. But also, I think even if that family has absolutely no medical knowledge, they can look out as an advocate for their relative to make sure that that person is being treated properly. To make sure that people are doing what's supposed to be done on the regular schedule.
Right.
They're not missing out. I mean, even like one thing I wrote about as basic as food. Hospitals that are very expensive and are focused on the health of their patients, supposedly, often have terrible food. It's virtually uneatable.
I can attest.
Yeah, and in some circumstances, you'll have a patient who has specific dietary needs, and the patient will tell them over and over again, and they just won't do it. For example, giving meat to a vegetarian.
Right.
So you've got some vegetarian there in the hospital who they keep giving meat to, and that includes Jello. Jello is made from animals. So how is this person supposed to get healthy when either they eat this food that they don't want to, so that's going to make them depressed and feel bad and everything, or they're going without food, and that's just one of the most basic things that families can look for. They can bring in extra food from home. They can make sure that the food's right. Just ensure that the treatment is good, and they'll know there's something we don't know about medically. Let's call the patient's general practitioner or something. Let's see if we can get him involved in the treatment, or finding a specialist who can give us a second opinion on something, instead of just we've given you the patient, we've given you the nursing home resident, and you do whatever you do, right? And when somebody's not looking over their shoulder, whatever they do probably won't be quite as good.
Right. It's so, it really goes against nature, what we're doing. And we're supposedly fighting nature with the virus, and we go against nature, the natural thing that humanity, the reason we're here is it's not like this is the first virus that's come along in the last several thousands of years that humanity hasn't survived, except this time we decided, you know what, let's kill everyone else, because the virus isn't killing enough. Let's kill everyone else, and the economy and lives and families, and it's horrible. I not only can't believe that it's happened, but I can't believe how much Americans, Fairbanksans, Texans have just succumbed and said, yes, master, we obey you, master. I mean, I know it's getting more, people are pushing back more now, but, could you have ever imagined in supposedly free America that churches would be shut down on Sunday, on Easter Sunday, on a religious holiday? One of the most important things in Christianity is the resurrection of Christ, and it's celebrated on Easter, and no go. And the churches were empty. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, that brings to mind, President Trump. He was saying that, let's shut things down for a little while and we'll open up by Easter. And that goes back to the Republican Democrat thing, where Democrats have tended, in general, to be harsher in their support of the crackdown. But President Trump, he helped instigate a lot of this.
Yes.
He gave the inspiration, and he gave the cover for state governors to go ahead and do what they've done in most states.
Yep.
He was saying shut things down until at least Easter, and then Easter was coming. They're like, let's shut it down longer. And he had Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx up there with him, spreading the fear. So he has a lot of blame on his shoulders for what's happened. He stepped back some, and now he's trying to act like he's the one who wants to open things up, but he helped shut him down to begin with.
Yeah, and his backtracking, it's kind of like too little, too late. I mean, now you got to fight 10 times harder because of the mistake that you made in the very beginning by allowing it, or encouraging it. It hurts my head. You wrote something really interesting about waiting for permission to go back to regular life. It was a chump move, and I read it at Target Liberty first, and was just like, oh. It was so good. That's actually originally like, I got to get Adam back on the show. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
If you would.
Well, a lot of that article was talking about a few of the things I've talked about already. A large focus was on how at the beginning it was sold that the coronavirus is dangerous for everybody. Here's some, and I think you were talking about this earlier, like in China, here's some like 25-year-old old guy walking down the street and suddenly he collapses. Coronavirus is killing people. They're just dropping on the sidewalks. But it turned out that that's not the case.
Right.
If somebody's like 25 years old and they die from coronavirus, they got a lot of other problems almost for sure. It's not, you have to be quite old. You have to be quite sick to really be in one of the risk groups. So, and the government, this word got out, and the government had to adjust its policy, and it's not its policy so much, but it's rhetoric, and started saying, well, all of this is to save the vulnerable.
Right.
That's why we have to have the lockdowns. That's why we have to wear masks and so forth. But the vulnerable aren't helped. The vulnerable they're isolated, so they've got mental issues. They can't even go to the gym to exercise, which later in life becomes even more important. They're not getting the sunlight, the vitamin D. They're not with having family looking out for them and having that bond with family. They're not being able to complete their bucket list. They're not being able to do any of these things that make life meaningful and make life safer. But yeah, it's ultimately a chump move if we just keep going along with this crackdown. We have to resist it.
Yeah.
The director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention earlier this month in a Senate subcommittee hearing said that there will not be the beginning of a return to normal life until the middle of the summer of next year. Mm-hmm. And that's contingent upon a vaccination happening, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So first of all, that's too long to wait for something that shouldn't have ever shut down anything.
Right.
Okay, none of this should have ever happened to begin with. So why are we waiting another, all the way until the middle of the summer to stop things? But also on top of that is this is a vaccination that's being rushed through in a totally atypical fashion for a coronavirus disease for which there really haven't been vaccines because it's really difficult to make one.
Right.
So, and they're not doing all the safety protocols and so forth. So potentially there's a lot of danger from this vaccine, and there's a lot of likelihood that the vaccine's not even going to be helpful. So,
and even Fauci admits at the most, well, if we're lucky, the vaccine might help 50% of the people. Mm-hmm. And, and Dr. Paul's talked about in 1976 when he was one of two people that voted against that vaccine. I forget what virus was coming through then. The vaccine killed more people than the virus did.
Right. And that's a risk. So right now, like 60% of the people are saying no way. It's less than 20% of the people that are saying I'm anxious to take this vaccine.
Right. That's encouraging, isn't it?
That is encouraging, absolutely. But they're saying that the opening up is contingent on people taking the vaccine.
Oh, true.
If 15% of the people take the vaccine, people like the head of the CDC are going to say, oh, well, I guess we can't open up because not enough people have taken the vaccine.
Right.
So the other thing that it might do is to apply pressure to get people to take the vaccine. You already have to wear a mask to go places. Well, they might say, well, why? You have to prove you've been vaccinated.
Right.
If you want to go to school, well, prove you've been vaccinated. They're already making the college students be tested regularly at a bunch of colleges.
Yeah.
To travel, you have to be vaccinated. So there could be all these pressures to keep your job. You have to be vaccinated. So I worry that what they'll do to get those vaccination numbers up is to apply all this pressure on people. They're already going to make it free. They're already going to make it available everywhere, right? But people don't even want it free and at the local CVS. Even if you can if you can walk down the block and get it for free, they still don't want it. So you have to apply the additional pressure.
And
do
you think
I think that's a very threatening situation?
You think some of that pressure, the president has said, he's going to have the military do it, and I'm going to have the military boys out there ready to just give it. And I wonder, would that be some of the pressure, intimidation because you see military,
right.
Kind of like here at our Walmart when they said that you had to wear a mask, before you came in, and they had their little guards out there that would, suggest that, hey, or hand you a mask. Well, the first day that happened, I didn't go to Walmart, but I was driving by close enough to see that there was a very, very, very large man standing outside checking on everyone that was coming in. I thought, that looks like intimidation to me. It's like,
wow.
You better wear a mask. You got a bouncer out there. And I haven't seen him recently, but the very first day, I believe it was around the first day I drove by there. And I said, oh, well, that's how they're doing it. You're going to wear, of course, we know that, they also, it's pretty much voluntary. I haven't worn a mask in any of those places. And several people I know won't.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah, it depends on the place. Some places will kick you out, but
yeah.
But I believe the Walmart's adopted as policy that they don't do that.
Right.
Though they'll still have a sign saying it's mandatory. They still might have somebody telling you you're supposed to put it on as required, but that they won't kick you out. And I think that a fair number of larger stores have moved that way. Unfortunately, some people are so afraid that you do have to worry that some other person shopping there might decide to be an enforcer.
Yes.
So there is that risk. But I think the stores have moved a lot of them to not becoming the enforcers themselves, because more people like you are deciding to shop there without the mask, and they don't want to lose your business.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, by seeing you, other people shopping there will either take their mask off that day or do it on a future trip. Mm-hmm. Because I think there are a fair number of people who are wearing it, just because it is a rule, just because they think it's impolite not to, but they don't believe it. And that goes back to the whole how I'm understanding more about living in a communist country. Because all those people who are marching in the communist parades, carrying banners in the Soviet Union, they got the day off work and were told to do that a lot of times.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you hold the banner and your boss is happy, right? And you march along. So I think that's how a lot of people are taking this. They feel like they've got to put the mask on, as part of this pressure from the government and from the people around them, but they resent it.
Yeah. There's, that's also happening with the travel, and I wonder if they'll even have to introduce any laws to do it. Here in Alaska, the governor issued mandates that you had to fill out a piece of paper, quarantine paper, when you came into the state, and now you have to get a test done to come into the state, and they call it mandates, but there's no enforcement. There's no law. So you don't have to do it, but most people will do it even if they know there's no law because of intimidation.
Yeah.
And some of us here, we just don't go along with any of it. We just ignore it, and there's no problem. So maybe they don't even have to introduce the laws. It's enforced by social expectation rather than by legalism.
Yeah. Here in Alaska, even at the very beginning, the state troopers said, well, we're not enforcing any of this because it's not law. And my in-laws came in to visit us here just a couple weeks ago, and they were in the long, roped off line so they could sign the quarantine papers and get all this and that. And I went in and first off talked to one of the security guards that were standing by him about football a little bit because I was wearing my Patriots hat. And we had to give each other a bad time because he was a Jets fan, loser. And anyways, and so I just went over to my in-laws and said, let's go. And I just lifted the rope up. They walked out and no one said a word. And we had a lot of eyeballs from all the sheep that were standing in, or the people that were standing in line. But, security guards were all around us and not a word was spoken to us. Like, oh, you must, blah, blah, blah. And it's so disappointing, more disappointing because we thought that Alaska was more libertarian than we're finding out. That at a time when there's no enforcement even, people still won't resist. I mean, much less, when you get the 72-hour bad guys going, when they do this, by golly, I'm going to be out there protecting my Constitution and my rights. I won't let And here, most of these, and we've looked in, most of these mandates are not law. They can't be enforced, and people still won't resist.
In fact, what we found is the mandates are illegal.
Yeah,
it's illegal for them to enforce them.
In Alaska, we've been trying to figure out how to do a lawsuit, but it hasn't worked out yet.
I'll tell you one thing with the mask mandates here. We have local ones in some places, plus the statewide one that was Governor Abbott put through. They all talk about the requirement to wear a mask indoors where keeping 6 feet distance is not possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, when you think about that, almost every store, it's possible to keep 6 feet away from everybody else. You just have to make a little effort. If you're grocery store, wherever. The only kind of place I could think of is some tiny little cell phone repair store, right? It's just like a closet, virtually. But even there, just keep the door open. You stand out in front of the door, and you reach your arm out. So, really, the stores shouldn't be enforcing people to wear masks at all if they read what the mandates say and apply them as written.
Right.
But they were passed knowing that stores weren't going to do that they were going to be super cautious and just put up a sign saying everybody wear a mask all the time inside the store. Across the door, you wear a mask, and that's what most of them have done. And most of them, you talk to the people running the stores, and they say, well, that's what the mandate requires. No, it doesn't. It doesn't require that. But the most twisted that I've seen is in Tarrant County, which is between Dallas and Fort Worth. Their mandate says the same thing. It's, you have to wear, you have to have a store policy to require people to wear a mask where they can't keep 6 feet apart. And at the end, it has a sample store policy that you can adopt. And the sample store policy says everybody has to wear a mask. So that's, and the store owners, they take that sample policy and they just implement. Okay, there it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Then they sell masks in some of these stores. They sell masks right on the side. This will not stop coronavirus, but we'll sell it to you so you can wear it anyway. It's unbelievable. It's so frustrating. We're kind of running towards the end of the hour, so I'm frustrated. Let's just talk a little, if you will, give us your thoughts on, the upcoming election, what might happen with that, and if you would, let's kind of end on that.
All right. Well, the upcoming election,
Because I
not
think
really
with
not great.
coronavirus, it'll make a difference with coronavirus, possibly.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it's hard to know what Trump thinks. He changes his mind. He does different things now than in the past. He brought in this Dr. Atlas to deal with coronavirus policy stuff, and that guy's closer to how we think than people like Dr. Fauci, so that's helpful. But he goes through people in these sorts of positions all the time too. You know, he's had a lot of secretaries of states and national security advisors, whatever. So I can't really have faith that Trump would do the right thing after winning re-election. Of course, you know, Biden's not even giving a hint that he'd do anything good as far as coronavirus goes.
Right.
So I mean, I guess he's a known commodity, just like in the election 4 years earlier, Hillary Clinton was. Right? You know what Hillary Clinton's going to do? She's going to start a bunch of wars and kill a bunch of people, right? So, you know, and you thought, hey, maybe, you know, Trump says he was against these wars in the past, right? And he hates Iran, but he said he wants to pull troops out of places. So we've kind of lucked out. You know, the U.S. killed like a top general of Iran and has done some other nasty stuff to Iran with sanctions and so forth. It hasn't started a full war. And there's been some movement of reducing troops overseas, but there's still a lot of military action taking place in those places, even if troop numbers go down.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not pulling the lever for either of them.
I know I'm asking the impossible question. It's so frustrating. I do hope if, you know, coming back into the flu season, Fauci and all those jerks are already saying, well, get ready for round 2 and we're going to have to lock everyone down, that people will they've got to stand up and say no. People that own businesses have to just say, too bad, I'm opening up. And people that don't own them, the consumers, we have to stand up for them. You know, it's the old thing, if your neighbor's not free, you're not free. And I hope that we'll see a real pushback. And we are in some places, but it just needs to be more. So, well, we're kind of running out of our time here. So we'll give you the last minute to tell us how to find it. I do want to ask as much as you can tell us, because you know him better than we do, how Dr. Ron Paul's doing today, or how he's doing in general.
Well, he sent out a Twitter post the other day saying he's doing great and had his thumb up. So that's what Dr. Paul said. I mean, before that, he had a medical issue while, I guess it was on Wednesday, taping his daily show, The Liberty Report, which is on YouTube, the Ron Paul Liberty Report. So they cut the show short, and he went to the hospital. But I really don't have more to say about it. I'm figuring he'll probably be back on the show hopefully soon, and we'll tell people about it more. As far as finding what I write, it's all at the Ron Paul Institute, and the website is ronpaulinstitute.org, and Dr. Paul is the chairman of the institute. And to directly find just my articles, you can just go to my website. It's adamdick.com, and that has links to various places. I have social media accounts also.
All right, Adam. And it's been way too long, and I'm going to be bugging you more to come back and visit with us. Okay. It's been great. You guys we appreciate the Institute so much, what all of you do there. I'm sincere. We need you guys loud and clear more than ever right now. So thank you for all your guys' work. Thank you for your work, and keep pushing on.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. All right, folks, we got to take our break. We'll be back in a few minutes.
After that vote to put the nomination to the full Senate. So a vote in the Senate would likely be around October the 28th.
Fox's John Roberts. Senate Democrats are blasting President Trump's decision to try to fill the seat, arguing that it should be filled after the election. Pennsylvania Democratic Senator Bob Casey.
I've got real deep concerns about any nominees that come from a list picked by right-wing groups. So that's I raised those issues before in both the Gorsuch and Kavanaugh confirmation fights, and here we are again.
Casey on Neil Cavuto Live. More protests expected over a grand jury decision not to charge Louisville, Kentucky police officers in the shooting death of Breonna Taylor. Fox's Brian Yenes in Louisville.
Protesters, not only here but nationwide, are vowing to continue to protest even after the grand jury's decision not to indict the 3 police officers in the killing of Breonna Taylor. Protests in New York City, for instance, last night, hundreds of people marching on the Brooklyn Bridge, blocking traffic for more than 2 hours. In Oakland, California, there were violent clashes with police.
There were 23 arrests last night in Louisville. America is listening to Fox News.
Across America, across Alaska, Democrats are pretending not to be Democrats. Elise Galvin says she's independent, but she ran in the Democratic primary. Her campaign is managed by Democrats and funded by Democrats. Now she's suing the state of Alaska for listing her as a Democrat on the ballot. Her law firm represents Democrats. If it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Elise was endorsed by Nancy Pelosi. She joined a team that wants to defund police, take away private insurance, take away guns, increase taxes, and shut down ANWR. Don Young fights every day for Alaska. No living Alaskan has created as many jobs as Don Young. He's been named the most effective congressman in America. We've had earthquakes, fires, low oil prices, and a COVID shutdown. Elise Galvin is one disaster we can actually prevent.
I'm Don Young, and I approve this message.
How much will new replacement windows cost? If you need windows, that's your first question. This is Chris Dunn, local owner of Renewal by Anderson. Call our free 48-hour price quote line, and within 48 hours, a Renewal by Anderson design consultant can measure your windows and patio doors, discuss your style and color options, and then provide a down-to-the-penny price quote that we'll honor for an entire year, all within 48 hours of your call. Right now, buy one window or patio door and get one 40% off with no money down, no payments, and no interest for 2 years. Don't waste your time with one of those unreliable window companies. It would be a privilege for us to provide you with a price on new windows, and then you decide what's best for your home. For more information on Renewal by Anderson's discount and 48-hour price quote, call 885-3100. 885-3100. 885-3100. That's 885-3100.
Hi, Fairbanks. This is Jimmy Cash. When I was elected to the Assembly last year, my goal was to rein in borough spending and stand up for residents who feel like they're being ignored. Nobody could have predicted where we'd be today, a time when hundreds of businesses have had to close their doors to the public, and thousands of residents are still uncertain about their financial future. Now more than ever, we need somebody willing to stand and rein in borough spending and stop new and increasing taxes. That's what I've done, and that's what I'll continue to do, and I'd appreciate your vote on October 6th.
This message paid for by Cash for Assembly.
Fall and winter in Alaska bring new sporting opportunities. Grouse, ptarmigan, and other small game hunting, snowshoeing, and winter camping, predator calling, and camping. Gear up with Frontier Outfitters and prepare to succeed. Traps, snares, and calls. Guns and ammunition. Stay warm and dry with the right clothing. Rest easy with tents, sleeping bags, and camp necessities. ATV and snow machine accessories are just downstairs at Century Hardware. Alaska is new every season, and for every season, there's Frontier Outfitters for your Alaskan lifestyle.
News Talk 660.
It will be found an unjust and unwise jealousy to deprive a man of his natural liberty upon the supposition he may abuse it. George Washington.
They who would give up an essential liberty for temporary security deserve neither liberty or security. Benjamin Franklin. The Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It is an instrument for the people to restrain the government, lest it come to dominate our lives and interests. Patrick Henry.
America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it would be because we destroyed ourselves. Abraham Lincoln.
I predict future happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them. Thomas Jefferson.
Property is surely a right of mankind as real as liberty. John Adams.
The Constitution is a guide which I never will abandon. George Washington.
is in bloom. The PR transmissions will resume. Now try to push, try to keep us all down and hope that we will never see the truth around. Another promise, another seed, another package like to keep us trapped in greed. All a green belts wrapped around our minds, an endless red tape to keep the truth confined. They will not force us, and they will stop degrading us, and they will not control us, and we will be victorious.
Come on.
Interchanging mind control, come let the revolution take its toll. If you could flick a switch and open your third eye, you'd see that we should never be afraid to die. Rise up and take the power back. It's time fat cats had a heart attack. You know that their time's coming to an end. We have to unify and watch our flag ascend.
All right. So it's time to quit messing around, Mike, and just stick to the good old stuff that we started out with. I haven't played that old kids quote for a long time. I think Levi, he was probably like 10 when he did when we did that one. Now he's engaged. And of course, this is our theme song for the Patriot Lament show. My name is Joshua Bennett, and here in the studio I do have Mike Anderson. Remember, folks, go to YouTube if you want to chat with us and see our ugly mugs. It's kind of fun. And please support our sponsor, alaskachaga.us. And again, we thank them for being willing to, support the show. Makes me feel like maybe it's not all for naught. Can you say that in the same sentence? Not all for naught? Well,
yeah, I guess so.
I mean, you can, but maybe. Right. So. Anyways, let's get to the phones, Mike. That's why we love to do this show. If you want to join us, it's 907-458-8255. Whatever's on your mind, unless we don't like what you're going to say, and then we'll just... No, here we go. Hello, caller. You are on the air. Thank you for calling Patriot Lament.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I sent a post to Delta News Place, and this one guy, Tim North, where I tell you, he was just left and right calling me one name up and down another to wear a mask, and I tried to just give him some education, and every time he just berated me with every kind of name calling. And I said, well, this is really not a debate. And he says, you have no respect. And anyway, he keeps telling me what a child I am, how stupid I am. And it was just, I figured, well, Delta, they're like more free than Fairbanks. And I was very surprised that there was no discussion. It was just horrible beratement. So I was like, wow, I feel sorry for Delta for having Tim North in there putting everybody down for their freedom and liberty.
Interesting.
Well, those women in Saudi Arabia who won't wear a burqa, they don't have any respect either.
For who? Themselves?
For the people that want them to wear it.
Yeah. It's just amazing how vicious people can get over what somebody else does or doesn't do, even if they're 50 miles away from me. They want to pound me down in the ground.
Yeah, it's interesting, Cecily, that we're seeing that a lot more. People feel empowered to be able to invoke their supposed, they're bullies, but they think that now they have the right to invoke power over other people. And, we're individuals and other people, but it kind of goes along with politics, right? Because we think politics can tell people what to do, politicians. So, now it's just like, why can't anyone just tell the other person, you're going to live this way or else? Yeah. And, you don't see the other side. Like, I honestly believe this is, and the mask is part of it. Mike, I think you agree with me. The reason we talk about on the show, we are worried about flat out communism, and we are worried about either that or it's going to be a fascist state. One of the two. Who cares? Socialism.
It's the same thing.
Our rights being taken away that will not come back. Churches being shut down in America. That drives me nuts. I mean, it enrages me where I want to freak out on this radio show, and I'm not kidding. I want to freak out and just go ballistic. But I have not yelled at anyone for wearing a mask, even though I think it's part of a very larger scheme than what they're telling us. I don't see the other side. I'm sure it is somewhere, but I don't know anyone that believes as I do with the mask and the larger picture with it. None of them have gone around and said, you dirty, rotten rat, you're part of the socialist agenda for wearing a mask. You should be ashamed of your blah, blah, blah. Because we believe that individuals should have the right to make choices for themselves. If you want to wear a mask, if you want to stay in your home, if you want to live in fear, you have the right to do so. If you don't want to wear a mask, if you don't want to be quarantined in your home, you have the right to do that. We are Americans. We're individuals. We're founded supposedly on individual liberty, and we cannot forget it because we're that close. If you're on YouTube, you can see it. We're that close to losing it all. And as John Adams said, liberty lost is never regained.
Well, I sure hope that people would pay attention to all the different doctors and nurses, the OSHA, everyone saying that there's a specific way to wear them and do them and whatever, and it's just people have gone nuts and they're looking for any tool to bully somebody. It just I don't understand the megalomaniac at all.
It's shameful because they've managed to divide, which Mike, we've and Cecily, we got a lot of phone calls, so I'm going to thank you so we can get moving on. It's good to hear from you, though. Thank you. Mike, just real quick, we know that the National Socialists worked very well by dividing the people, turning your neighbor, and the communists did the same thing. So if you would just, our phones are loaded, so make it quick.
Yeah,
isn't that what they do? Divide and conquer.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And it's all about using social pressure to do it. And they've used social pressure to enforce these expectations, like Cecily was pointing out. But we haven't done anything in the opposite direction. And this is what I did. I did this last week at I went in the stores, one of the larger stores around here. I was buying some ammunition. So
bullets.
Yeah. Get them when you can, Anyway, so I went to the checkout counter and the lady puts up her mask. And I don't know if they have a requirement because I see people there without them too.
Right.
And so I don't know what the policy is. Anyway, so she puts up her mask, and I did the opposite of what everyone else does. I said, you don't have to put that on for me.
Yeah.
And she had it on anyway, but maybe that's what we should do more often.
Absolutely.
Change it around.
I've done that myself. When the person came around and started, I said, you don't have to do that for me.
Right.
I'm not worried about it. And it was at a convenience store, a Tesoro.
Mm-hmm.
And I said something. They said, "Oh, thank you."
Mm-hmm.
I was
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, good. They don't necessarily like it. Let's get back to the phones, Mike, because the board's loaded again. So, hello, caller. You're up next.
Hey, I just wanted to share with you guys. My wife and I went to take our 10-year-old son to a movie at the local unnamed theater here in Fairbanks, and this was the first time, obviously, since this whole thing started, that we decided to go to a movie.
Yeah, we won't name Regal Theaters. So
right.
Go ahead.
Don't want to call anybody out, but so we're as a family, we're right completely in agreement with what you guys are talking about. We've been against the whole thing since the beginning.
Yeah.
And we walk up to the doors. We saw that there was like 3 or 4 people inside the lobby that didn't have masks on. So we were like, right on, we're fine. So we walk in, and we bought our tickets online. So I pulled up the app, and we got the little digital ticket.
Yeah.
And so I just show it to the kid kind of at the front where the podium used to be. And he's standing there with a mask on, and he's got a box full of masks. And he's like, you guys have masks? And we were like, no. He says, would you like one? No, we're okay. We're not wearing masks today. And I feel bad because it's part of the generation of these younger people. They don't know how to deal with situations like that.
Right.
Like he was in a complete panic mode, and he's looking left and right, and all of a sudden the manager just happened to be there. And she comes walking around the corner, and you could tell she was pretty upset. And she says, you have to have a mask on to be in here. And we said, well, we got our tickets right here. We know where our auditorium is. We know where our seats are. We showed her the tickets, and we said, we're just going to go get our seats. And she says, I'm going to call the cops. And so she called the cops.
Wow.
And we went and we sat in the auditorium, and nobody in the auditorium except one person was wearing a mask.
Nice.
And all those people were not eating. And that's their stipulation. You have to have it on unless you're eating or drinking.
Right.
And
which makes so much sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because Corona doesn't spread when you're eating something,
right?
Only when you're not.
But so anyways, we get our seats, and we're completely isolated from everybody else. We're not even anywhere near anybody else. And about 10 minutes later, 4 officers walk in, and they were actually very polite. We after this whole encounter, my wife actually sent a thank you letter to the police station on just how they conducted themselves. They didn't make a big deal about it. They even had a conversation with us about it and how they thought it was ridiculous. But unfortunately, any business can
sure
ask somebody to leave regardless,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the main point of this is I know a lot of people are really afraid to even voice their opinions about this, but I want you all to know that a lot more people than just you are thinking the same thing. And just remember that not everybody wants to be first, but most people would like to be next.
Call of the week right here, and I'm giving you a hand clap.
So just stand up and know that you're not going to get in trouble necessarily. You might, but what's it worth? You got to make a stand sometime.
You're darn right. And we are at the point where we have the least chance of being shot. Let's just put it that way. So let's resist now, push back now when the resistance back to us is minimal. The threat for violence to us is at its minimum. What better time to push back than when we don't have to really worry about it?
And you may end up finding that the people that are coming to escort you out completely agree with you, but they have to wear a mask to keep their job.
Yeah.
Well, before you go, I just want, and I'm going to be vague here. I was privy to that story from the other party's point of view, not the ones that showed up in response, the 4 people that showed up.
Yep.
And I'm glad you called. They appreciated the way that you spoke to them. And they also
good point.
And in their organization, what they said to you about it being being silly and all of that, that is what they really think.
Yeah. You mean you actually heard about our incident?
Yes, I did.
Oh wow!
through another channel.
I think it's great because I explained this to my wife. I said, how often do they get a thank you letter when they kick somebody out of a building? That's probably the first time.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, you got to show respect. And anyways, thanks for taking my call, guys. Have a great day.
You did
I really
it the right
appreciate
way.
your show.
Thank you for what you did. And before you go, you weren't happening there to watch Empire Strikes Back, were you?
Not a chance.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Keep it up, man. We appreciate that.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Too. All right, let's head on to the next caller here. Hello, caller. You're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, what a great call that was.
Yes.
I wanted to throw a term out there, which was samizdat, like what the people in Russia were doing during the Soviet Union to kind of throw some sand in the gears of the state. And that story just now was a great example that if more people do that, it makes it impossible for them to continue down this path of enforcement. And that's only one way you can do it. There's so many ways. Your show is one thing that you're pushing back. And if more people push back, I think it's going to make this whole thing impossible and we'll be free at last.
Yeah, and it's encouraging to other people that are just, they might just need to see one other person without a mask for them to get the courage to go, you know what? I'm done with this. And again, you know, it's not the silly diaper that people are putting on their face. It's not about that. It's a much bigger thing that's going on. And the masks are just one of the symptoms of the actual sickness that is happening in America. We have to push back.
I just wanted to add real quick that I think the people who are enforcing that this has a religious value to them.
Yes.
Like scientism. I mean, they're all about germ theory. They're all about science. They're all about, you know, the white lab coat priest class. And then when you explain to them that these diapers are going to keep this out like your chain link fence keeps out bumblebees around the yard, that it doesn't even make mathematical sense. Based on the sizes of these things, you know, it's a fervor. It's, you know, and I think part of the sickness is that normal spirituality is declined among certain groups, and they're replacing it with this.
Yeah.
So, thanks for the show.
Hey, thanks for calling. I appreciate it. You know, Mike, instead of going to a stupid grocery store, maybe a bunch of us should just gather together and go to a good movie. Because they're playing some of the old Star Wars from the 70s and
remastered versions. Good. Oh, someone asked me a question here on the board. I'm not able to type an answer in.
Yeah, Mike.
I don't have a login for that.
Mike's the Patriot Lament resource manager, and some things just need to be kept secret. So let's get on with the phones. We only got about 6 minutes or 5 minutes, so let's keep going. Hello, caller. You're up on Patriot Lament.
This is Randy.
Hi, Randy. How are you today?
Oh, fine. Just kind of on the general subject of rights, I wanted to point out that bad anti-discrimination ordinance that was passed last year by the City Council and then vetoed, Ordinance 6093. The title of it, the exact title of it is an ordinance amending FGC Chapter 1 by adding sections 1 through 21 through 128 addressing equal rights. So it gives people the false impression that this has something to do with providing equal rights, but of course it does no such thing whatsoever. And you of course know this, but just to espouse about this, what it does is it takes away rights from citizens. It takes away freedoms, because when we discuss rights, in my opinion, generally you're talking about natural rights, and my definition of a natural right is a benign activity that a person can engage in without being stopped by the government. And those rights are natural. They're intrinsic, God-given rights. You know, they're not provided by the government. The government is just set up to protect those rights. So another interesting thing about Ordinance 6093, which will be coming back if in this next election the two conservatives that are being termed out are replaced by two left-wing persons, that will come back and will be saddled with this because they'll have a 5-to-1 majority. That's why I'm recommending that people vote for Lonnie Marnie and Jim Clark, two good conservatives. But anyway, in this ordinance, the word prohibited is used 6 times. And the interesting thing is, you might think, oh, prohibited, what's prohibited? You know, oh, they're prohibiting the government from doing something. No, the opposite. It prohibits people from doing something. It's exactly the opposite of what's in the Constitution of the United States, where it says Congress shall pass no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In other words, that word prohibiting there is the government is prohibited so as not to encroach upon the rights. But this ordinance that the city council would like to pass, or, you know, there's three, anyway, they get their majority, it will take away rights. It has nothing to do with equal rights, because the natural rights that we all are familiar with, all people, whether they're gay people, straight people, you know, short people, tall people, they all have these equal rights already equally. And so that's what I think about it.
Yep. Well, I appreciate that, Randy, and it'll come up sometime here once it gets closer when it comes back. But I appreciate you calling and bringing that up, because that's exactly that's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that was a little bit a different situation, but let's keep getting the callers. Hello, caller. You are on the air. Thanks for calling.
Hey, guys. I always really, really enjoy your show.
Thank you.
I've got a question, though, about these masks.
Okay.
You said earlier it's about a much bigger agenda. That's what I don't understand. What is it? What is this about? What are you guys saying that this is about? You said like when you were talking with Cecily, you said this. You've never run up to somebody that it was in a mask and said, "Hey, you're part of the big socialist conspiracy." Is it a big socialist conspiracy that you're saying, or a little while ago you're talking about this is just a symptom of a much bigger thing? What is the bigger thing that you're talking about?
Well, I think there's a few different things, and one of them is to get people to obey something that, for one, they have told us for the last 100 years does not work, and that is wearing a mask for a virus. There are several countries in the world that have said, well, we're not going to, I mean, not third world countries like the Netherlands. They're not third world. They're quite up there. And they said, well, all the research has always said that masks won't work for a virus. You have to have a respirator. And so why is the American government requiring in some places when they told us it doesn't work? They just told us a week ago, cloth masks don't work. Why are everyone still wearing? So why is it? It's the lockdowns. Why did they tell churches that they couldn't get together and they obeyed? And I think part of it is because they're trying to get us into the mindset to obey. And this might just be like, when you have a long race, you got to start somewhere, and you just it just feels like to me this is part of a longer race towards socialism. I really believe it. And they're just using this like, oh, look what we got away with here. Let's see. Look what we got away with here. Let's see.
And I'm not saying you're wrong, because I mean, I'm always looking for conspiracy somewhere.
Well, and I don't want to be a conspiracy, but we're out of time. But you know what? Next week, if you'll tune in, we will make that the priority of what we think this really is all about, because we do have an
what
opinion.
I'm curious about. I mean, like, it just doesn't make any sense to walk in the door of a restaurant and go get seated wearing a mask, and you take your mask off and you eat. It just
it's unnatural. It doesn't even.
It's not even unnatural. It just makes no sense, and all you're trying to
illogical.
do. It seems like it's just illogical is right. You're just trying to make the people around you more comfortable, but it seems like the people around me are like, this is stupid also.
Yeah.
So but there's a few of them, some hippie chick over there, like, oh my gosh, that guy didn't have his mask on. Oh my gosh. So I guess what is the bigger picture? That's what I don't understand.
Well,
we're out of time. We got to go. I'm sorry, but next week, that's what we will focus on. And I appreciate that call, because you're right. We need to explain that better.
I'll tune in.
Thank you, folks, for tuning in to Patriot Lament. We'll see you next week. Be safe.
Phillips will match donations up to
Take
$250,000
off your
total
mask.
until September 30th. Visit alaskasealife.org. Save the center.
Please help us do more than just keep the lights on.
This communication was paid for by Lojeski for Assembly, 3971 Fahrenkamp Avenue, Fairbanks, Alaska, 99709.